Silence of the Lambs, a movie about Clarice Starling, a young FBI trainee who must receive the help of Dr. Hannibal Lecter, a notorious cannibal killer psychologist. With his help, she will catch another serial killer, a man who skins his victims and has been given the name Buffalo Bill. Silence of the Lambs is one of the most, if not the most, iconic horror movies of all time. According to Vogue, in almost the century-long history of the Oscars, only 6 horror films were nominated for Best Picture, and only one has gotten the chance to take it home. In 1991, Jonathan Demm's Silence of the Lambs became the only horror film to ever win the Best Picture Oscar. Jonathan Demme also won for his directing of the film, and Ted Tally went on to win Best Adapted Screenplay for this movie. Anthony Hopkins won Best Actor for his role as Hannibal Lecter.
Oh, and Senator, just one more thing. Love your suit.
And Jodie Foster won for Best Actress for her role as Clarice Starling.
Morning.
Dr. Lecter, my name is Clarice Starling. May I speak with you?
You're one of Jack Crawford's, aren't you?
I am, yes.
May I see your...
I have always loved the character of Clarice, and I have looked up to her for many years. Despite my family's worries, she was the ultimate reason why I wanted to go into the criminal justice field my freshman year of college. And even though I didn't become a cop, I continue to strive to be like her in every way. The heroine is a prime example of toughness and femininity wrapped into one. She's brave and she can hold her own against all of these serial killers that she comes up against, including Hannibal Lecter. I think the best way to summarize Clarice as a character is just saying that she's a badass, because she is. I think Jodie Foster honestly said it best in her acceptance speech at the Oscars in 1992.
Thank you, and thank the Academy for embracing such an incredibly strong and beautiful feminist hero that I am so proud of. Thank you very much.
As I mentioned before, Clarice is a character who could go head-to-head with criminals. She's a strong woman that can hold her own. I want to expand on this quote from Romano from Vox. Clarice's mix of fragility, determination, and independence gave her a complexity at the time when women's workplace struggles were usually depicted as comedic, as she broke ground for an entire generation of female characters. So let's expand on those aspects of Clarice, her fragility, her determination, and her independence, and see what we find about her. At the very beginning of the film, we see Clarice doing her field training in the woods of Quantico. Our initial impression of Clarice is that of a woman in struggle. This tiny but mighty girl climbs over obstacles and runs through thick, heavy forests. Not only do we see her struggling, but we also see her persevering and overcoming that struggle. Clarice is then called into Crawford's office, and she doesn't stop to try and freshen up or make herself look good. She shows up in a sweaty shirt and messy hair. We can tell that this is part of her character, and she's not focused on her looks. We see her going straight to the elevator, and it's blatantly obvious that she's the smallest person there. Not to mention she's the only woman in the elevator. This introduction to her character is very important and sets the tone for us to understand Clarice's place here at the FBI. It is blatantly obvious that Clarice is a petite woman. We could see that she is in a man's world and stands out differently than any other person in her field. The foundation of her character in this scene is very interesting because although we traditionally see her doing masculine things in a masculine place and doing it just as a man would, she's still a woman and doesn't exactly fit in. Even though Clarice is short-statured and beautiful, she won't let that get in her way of focusing on her job at hand. Clarice is a determined person and a hard worker. The next scene with Crawford also shows that Clarice is one of the brightest in her class, and because of this, she is chosen to help with this big case. Her dedication and willpower have gotten her to a higher position of authority than her peers. This has nothing to do with her sex, but everything to do with her mind. Clarice has many moments of frustration, especially when it comes to being a woman in this line of work. Some specific examples that I call frustrational scenes are when she first meets Dr. Chilton and he immediately hits on her, or when multiple MIGs throws a certain body fluid at her. I think a moment that is particularly frustrating to me is right before the autopsy of the victim to Buffalo Bill. Let's take a look at that. So here we see Clarice and Crawford arriving at the funeral home, and it is full of police officers. Crawford then talks to a sheriff and briefly mentions that they should talk in private while motioning to Clarice.
Sheriff, this type of sex crime has certain aspects I just as soon discuss in private. You know what I mean?
This makes Clarice stand out from the police officers, and it also makes her look fragile or that she doesn't belong there. All of this creates an environment where the policemen around here are staring at her. We can only imagine what they are thinking, but I see on their faces looks of that she doesn't belong, she shouldn't be there, and they see an image of a woman too fragile to discuss serious matters in the case, and she's out of place in this rough environment. I believe that it is this moment and her seeing the people in the funeral home that all caused Clarice to have a flashback to her father's funeral. This vulnerable, awful time when she was a little girl, the little girl that still lives inside her. This significant time in her life brings out feelings of being small and being a child, almost making the audience feel that way. We really feel for Clarice and can see that she's been hurt. This moment brought emotion and fragility to a character that has otherwise been highly determined and non-stop in her work. These moments of frustration keep us rooting for her to be tough and a strong woman throughout the film. Although Clarice has moments of fragility, they do not make her weak. She continues to use her feminine side to her benefit throughout the film, not necessarily her sex appeal per se, but rather her feminine energy as a means to be trusted or unsuspected. Clarice forms a relationship with Lecter that I don't think would be possible if she were a male. Hannibal likes her. He likes her wide-eyed desperation, her hidden troubles that he can see under the surface. I think Lecter sees her as a challenge and an equal. He's one of the only men in the film to give Clarice respect and see her as more than a woman, but a person.
Tell me his name, Doctor.
Clarice! Your case filed. Goodbye, Clarice.
I think another example of Clarice being seen as trustworthy because she's a female is in our final scene when she meets Jamie Gumb, aka Buffalo Bill. In this scene, Clarice knocks on Jamie's door to get more information regarding the first victim. She's unaware at that moment that she has met the infamous killer, and her superiors have been hunting after this man for a long time. Although Gumb knows Clarice is a woman of the law, he still sees her as just a woman. Gumb has overpowered women and killed them throughout the film with no problem. And so it's not surprising that he invites her inside. I think Gumb's narcissism allows him to believe that he can overpower Clarice very easily. But even with disarming Clarice of her sight in the final scene, this thought pattern is what eventually gets him killed in the end. Although our beloved character Clarice went through many vulnerable moments throughout the film, we can still see that in the end, she will always overcome. She will always be the woman who is determined. The woman we saw running through the forest at the beginning of the film, overcoming her struggles.